Thank you so much, and brilliant presentation as well from Dr. Rasha as well. Some of it's repeated, but it's nice to reinforce some of the facts as well, which I'm going to allude to today. But just talking on mental health, I mean, it's good that we're all talking about it because the stats are, frightening. Nearly 70 million working days are lost every year due to poor mental health. I mean, years ago, muscular was the #1 reason why people weren't in work. Now it's poor mental health, with 1 in 4 of us experiencing a mental health illness. And that's costing the UK economy as a whole £70 billion, which is equivalent to about $100 billion each year in loss of productivity and absence. So it's great that we're talking, and we alluded to education. We need to educate people because people are not talking about their mental health because they're scared of stigma and shame that will bring upon them. So we need to encourage people to talk about mental health. So I'm really pleased to be on this panel today where there's no stigma, there's no shame, and we can talk openly about mental health. And there's lots of reasons why people don't talk about mental health, because they're fearful of the stigma, of judgment, of people labeling them, giving them a label. If we went into the workplace and we said to people, we've been diagnosed with cancer, we would get the response, are you okay? What can I do for you? Can we give you hope for the future? What do you need? But because they've got a hidden illness, which is mental health, then there's name calling and shaming. So by holding spaces like we are today, we can help destigmatize mental health and more conversations. So, but also have a look at the way we work. There's lots of things that's contributing to poor mental health, overworking, trauma, bullying, having a baby, bereavement, many worries. We're in a cost of living crisis at the moment, where sometimes if you went for a local authority job or public sector, you'd have a job for life. There's job insecurities now. There's no stability. And then obviously we've got abuse and stress and anxiety. And we need to help people with poor mental health. And we can't help them unless we know what the signs and symptoms are. And we've already alluded to some of the physical signs like weight changes and headaches and stomach upsets and indigestion and panic attacks and heart disease. I had a friend who had really poor mental health and he started losing his hair. It was stress-related alopecia. He went to the doctor and the doctor said, "You are lucky it's your hair, because if it wasn't your hair, it could have been your heart." So we've got to really, really look after ourselves and dig deep, because it will come out in physical symptoms, and we don't want that. Emotional symptoms, look out for people who are crying, who are anxious, who are irritable, who are feeling demotivated, poor grades. If you're talking children, we alluded to children just now, their grades are going to go down. They're going to socially isolate themselves, and they're going to be very introvert. So we're looking at anxiousness, we're looking at emotions being exaggerated, we're looking at loss of interest in friends, we're looking at people not leaving the bedroom, not wanting to get out of bed for 2, 3, 4 weeks. We can all have a down day, we can all have a sad day, but when you're physically depressed, then you're going to be sad for 2 weeks or longer. So we're looking out for these signs when people are remaining depressed, when they can't have the energy to open their curtains, to put their shoes on, to get dressed, to have a shave, to wash their hair. Are they wearing the same clothes for 2, 3 days? So these are signs that we need to look out for. And again, how they behave around friends, around people, around food. Social gatherings, are we starting to avoid social gatherings? Are we reliant on addictions like smoking and drugs and alcohol. So these are behavioral signs. Are we starting to miss deadlines in work? Are we overworking? Are we overconfident? Are we underconfident? Are we got irrational behaviors? Is our productivity decreased? Is our punctuality decreased? Are we finding it hard to engage in conversations? You know, if all these go unnoticed, then we can get burnout. And I've experienced burnout twice in my lifetime. And you don't realize burnout is happening. Sorry. You don't realize burnout is happening to you until it's too late. You know, 9 out of 10 adults in the UK experienced high levels of stress last year, with 1 in 5 of us needing to take time off in work. And 49% of workers state that their employees haven't got the skills to spot the signs when they're burning out. So if they can't spot the signs, how can they help you? So we need to look and see and recognize in ourselves so we can help ourselves. So what can we do to prevent the burnout? Well, first of all, I think we need a well-being plan to look after yourself. That includes your food, your exercise, your sleep, your diet, regular check-ins with yourself, with others. Communication is essential to mental health. You don't realize the conversation you're having with someone might just be a life-saving conversation. So regular check-ins all the time. And acknowledgements as well. When someone's working hard, tell them they're working hard. When someone's being productive, tell them they're being productive. You know, we're quick enough to criticize people when they miss deadlines, but we're not as quick to compliment people. And I think those compliments are important for well-being. And it's just having those conversations. You know, we're actively looking for signs and symptoms, but think about the environment that we're in. Think about the environment that we're creating as well. And this goes from children, you know, the environment that they grow up in will determine their mental health. If they've got a thriving environment, then they're going to have a thriving life. It's like if you put a bad piece of fruit into a bowl, then the whole bowl gets contaminated. So think of the environment. If you've got a good living environment, then hopefully you will have good mental health as well. But mental health don't choose who it discriminates against. Mental health doesn't choose age, it doesn't choose gender, race, social status, lifestyle, job. Mental health can happen to all of us. We can have good mental health, we can have poor mental health. And we've touched on medication for it as well. But I just want to stress on conversations and well-being conversations, because we don't have enough of them. And conversations, you know, are saving lives. I've been following a man called Kevin Hines. I don't know if you know of him. He's an American guy and infamous for jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And he survived, and whether God was looking after him or not, but a seal came up and lifted him to the surface that day. And he said, the minute my hand left that bridge, I knew I did not want to die, but all I wanted was for someone to ask me if I was okay. Nobody approached me, nobody asked that question, so I jumped. And if we can just ask these questions, if we can take time out to check in with people, it's so good to talk. You know, that conversation could be the most important conversation you have that day. You know, it's going to reduce hidden burdens. It's going to reduce shame. It's going to build connections. It's going to help people feel supported. And we just need to give ourselves the confidence to talk to others. So ways of keeping a conversation going. Listening is such a hard skill, and it's an underrated skill. You know, listen with the intent to reply, which is what most of us do, but just listen without interrupting. Listen and be non-judgmental when you're listening, because you might not always like what comes back to you. it's good also to summarize and repeat what people say to you as well, because by repeating what's been said, it shows you've been actively listening to the conversation. Using verbal prompts, and also pauses. Pauses are powerful when we're having well-being conversations. But what we've got to be scared of is giving too much advice and the word "I'm fine," because we all know "I'm fine" means I'm not okay. So I'm just going to round up by ending with my 4E approach. And the 4E approach is environment, effective communication, empathy, and engagement. So when we're having these well-being conversations and when we're talking to people, it's really important to consider the environment. We've talked about social media already today, but we need to make sure when we're having well-being conversations that we create a safe place, no disturbances, no phone calls, no emails, no, I've got to be at a meeting in 5 minutes time, you need to be quick, because we're getting all held up in this rat race of work, and we just need to take time out and be present, because we can be with people without being present. Effective communication, our body language. It's no point sitting there looking at your watch, folding your arms, looking out the window. Again, eye contact. Be present when we're with people. Empathy, showing empathy, understanding the person and trying to understand what they're experiencing with their poor mental health, and knowing where to signpost them. And the last one, engagement, offer our ear, but offer empathy and be approachable, and be practical, assist them to maybe help and resources, assist them to local charities or local helplines. So that is all about mental health. We're all fearful of the word mental health, and I just think if we can educate people more, we can destigmatize the whole conversation. And this is why I was really keen to join in this conversation today in this panel, because it's really great that we're all talking about mental health. We're talking about stigma, destigmatizing, and people are judging. And we want to reduce the shame. We want to build connections. I'm here in the UK. We've got people in India, and we're having a global conversation. This is a global movement that I'm really proud to be part of. So thank you for inviting me. And I just want to end on one of my favorite quotes, which is by Desmond Tutu. And Desmond Tutu says, "There comes a point when we need to just stop pulling people out of a river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in." So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dawn, for addressing some of the most critical yet often overlooked points, I would say. And I have seen many myths like everybody in this world. And one myth that is very common is that the belief that mental health issue only happens to certain kind of people, especially those who have some kind of history, family history. Do you think genetic history matters when it comes to mental health issues?
Um, genetic history, thank you for that question. Genetic history does play a part of mental health. Like I said about earlier about putting a bad piece of fruit into a bowl. If you're brought up with conditions such as ADHD, depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, they all have I can't say the word now, help me out with the word,
Heritability.
yes, sorry, I'm dyslexic. Sometimes it pops in every now and then. So that will increase the risk of mental health. So generic is genes are part of the continuation of family mental health, but we've got to think of other contributing factors as well. Things like the environment, things like past traumas, stress, upbringing, your social circles. Are you using substances? Because substance use has also got a link to giving a poor mental health. So the answer is yes, I believe generic history is part of it, but it's only a small puzzle piece. It makes up part of poor mental health. But with any mental health, early intervention is a must. The earlier we can get help, the better.
Hmm.
May I add?
Yes.
So when we think about genetics, we only think about the inherited genetics. And like how Dawn pointed out, there are a lot of other aspects that impact our genetics throughout our lifespan, including climate change and all of that. So those are epigenetics. So all illnesses, whether they are physical, psychiatric, whichever way you're looking at it, all medical illnesses are an expression of our genetic basis. Having said that, what might how those genetics evolve makes a difference as well. So it's not just my family genetics that's important, it's my personal genetics that's important. Sorry, I just kind of wanted to add that. Thank you.
Really good point. I think we froze. I think we've lost our host.
Yeah, I think
That was a
right.
really good point. So thank you for adding that in as well. I think it's just me and you left. The others are froze.
Yeah, maybe.
Ah.
I'm
Ah.
still here, but I'm not a host, so I can help you with that.
Right.
Right.
I think she's yeah, hopefully she can join back.
Great. Can you still hear me and see me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
we can.
okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Dawn. And I'm also quite curious about, you just mentioned dyslexia as well. And I think it's another conversation that really needs to be opened up is neurodiversity. And I'm really grateful that there's more talk about it now, because I think we also need some education on that, specifically with parents and children. And when it comes to children's names for one another as well, and maybe the school system that could support it in a different way. And I was wondering if you wanted to share anything about neurodiversity and education. Is there education that you do around that in terms of mental health, especially if it's not being spoken about?
Yeah, I think I'm not an expert in neurodiversity. I have two children who have ADHD diagnosis, so obviously I've got lived experience, and myself with the dyslexia. I know it's harder to detect in girls than boys. My son was diagnosed at the age of 5, and my daughter got diagnosed at the age of 24. So, and a lot of women that I talk to who are neurodiverse have often gone unnoticed during childhood and adolescence. So it's harder for females than males when you're talking neurodiversity. And very, very different symptoms as well. If I look at both my children, they're both neurodiverse, but very, very different symptoms. But I do know that 50% of all mental health concerns are started by the age of 14. So we really need to look at adolescence, because like in my daughter's case, she got diagnosed at 24. It's gone unnoticed by teachers and through the education system. So I think it's great that we're talking about it, but it needs to be talked about in schools. It needs to be identified at grassroots, so children don't fall off the system and get misdiagnosed. But we need to also be alert to children who may be neurodiverse. Have a look at their sleep patterns, have a look at their changes in their mood, have a look at their school performance. My daughter's grades were a lot lower than my son's, and it wasn't because she didn't try as hard. It's because she just didn't understand the way that she was taught. They may need to be taught in a different manner. The education may be needed to be presented differently to them, because they're more kinesthetic learners rather than audiovisual. So we need to look at all the different learning styles when we're looking at neurodiversity. And I think we need to bring that more into the education system, because it's not one size fits all. And I know a lot of the education system in the UK, children are taught to pass exams. They're not taught about life. And that's what's missing. You know, it's life skills, it's how to cope with life as well, and social aspects of life. And we need to sort of look out, because if we don't see, they don't get the support, then that's when the self-harm comes in and the eating disorders, because that's something that the adolescents can control. So they can't control their emotions or their hormones, but they can control their feelings by self-harming and controlling what they put in their body, whether it's excessive exercise, it's eating, it's self-harm, it's drugs. So like I say, 50% of all mental health conditions will start in adolescence, and a lot of it is linked to mental health is linked to neurodiversity. Yes.